The life of Caliph Umar ibn al-Khattab is filled with lessons of justice, humility, strength, and the deep balance between firmness and mercy. Among the most moving parts of his biography are the many stories of how he interacted with women, how he protected their rights, and how he ensured that Islam's message of dignity for women was upheld in society. Umar was known for his strict adherence to the Quran and Sunnah, yet at the same time his heart was deeply compassionate, and his leadership showed a powerful balance of authority and tenderness. To reflect on his stories with women is to reflect on how Islam elevated their status, how justice was safeguarded, and how leadership was lived in the most human and sincere way. Before Islam, women in Arabian society faced widespread mistreatment and injustice. Many were denied inheritance, some were treated as property, and some were subjected to practices as cruel as female infanticide. With the coming of Islam, women were given rights that had never been recognized before, and it was the responsibility of the leaders after the Prophet to ensure those rights were honored. Umar, as the second Caliph, understood this responsibility deeply. He was a man known for his toughness and for striking fear into the hearts of the oppressors, yet when it came to women, he showed gentleness, deep concern, and a relentless pursuit of fairness. His stories with women highlight his balance of justice and compassion, and they continue to inspire those who seek to understand leadership in Islam. One of the most famous stories is about Umar walking through the streets of Medina at night. He was known for patrolling the city in disguise, making sure people were safe and their needs were met. On one of these nights, he overheard a woman reciting poetry in sadness. She was lamenting her loneliness as her husband was away in battle for long periods of time. Umar listened attentively and realized the difficulty faced by women whose husbands were engaged in long military campaigns. The very next day, he gathered the companions and asked his daughter Hafsa, the mother of the believers, how long a woman could remain patient without her husband. She replied, 4 months. Umar immediately decreed that no soldier would be kept away from his family for more than 4 months at a time. This story shows not only his concern for women's emotional well-being, but also his wisdom in consulting women themselves before making a policy. He did not assume or dismiss her voice, but valued it, giving us a timeless lesson in leadership and empathy. Another story tells of a woman who once confronted Umar in public during his caliphate. He was delivering a sermon and suggested placing restrictions on the amount of dowry mahr that women could receive, believing it was a way to prevent excessiveness. A woman stood up from the crowd and boldly challenged him by quoting the Quran, reminding him that Allah allowed giving women a large dowry if men so wished. Umar, instead of silencing her or dismissing her correction, immediately admitted she was right and retracted his statement. He said, "The woman is right and Umar is wrong." This moment is powerful because it shows that Umar, the mighty caliph who commanded empires, was humble enough to accept correction from a woman in public, and he did not see her voice as less valuable. For all Muslims, this becomes a lesson that leadership requires humility, and that truth must be accepted no matter who speaks it. There is also the story of Umar providing direct service to women in need. On many occasions, he would carry sacks of flour or food on his own back to widows, poor women, or single mothers, refusing to delegate this responsibility to others. Once, during a time of famine, he would not eat meat or ghee until the people had access to them, surviving only on bread and oil because he did not want to taste comfort while women and children in his community suffered. On another occasion, he saw a widow struggling with her children and quietly went to her home, cooking food for them with his own hands. One of his companions offered to do it for him, but Umar insisted, saying, "Will you carry my burden on the day of judgment?" This shows his sense of accountability, that he saw the cries of women and children as his personal responsibility, not just a task to pass on to others. His gentleness extended to young girls as well. There is a narration where a father brought his daughter to Umar, worried about her future. Umar reassured him about the rights and dignity of daughters, reminding him that raising daughters with kindness and responsibility would be a means of entering paradise. This was a radical shift from the pre-Islamic mindset that saw daughters as burdens. Umar embodied the teachings of the Prophet, who had himself emphasized the honor of raising daughters well. By enforcing such values, Umar ensured that women were no longer dismissed or devalued, but were instead seen as an essential and honored part of the community. Umar's governance was filled with policies that safeguarded women's rights. He was strict about ensuring that women received their rightful share of inheritance, that widows were supported from the public treasury, and that no one oppressed or exploited them. He placed inspectors in the markets to ensure women merchants were not cheated, and he personally intervened when he saw injustice. Women felt confident enough to approach him directly, sometimes even scolding him, because they trusted his fairness. This was a reflection of the Prophet's legacy, for the Prophet had always allowed women to speak openly and had valued their counsel. Umar carried that legacy forward, showing that true leadership listens to the voices of all. There is another moving story of Umar's respect for elderly women. It is reported that he once encountered an old woman who criticized him for something. Instead of reacting with anger or dismissing her, Umar lowered his head and listened to her attentively, even though he was the Caliph and one of the most powerful men of his time. When someone asked him why he was giving so much attention to her words, Umar replied that she deserved respect and that her advice was valuable. This humility toward women, even in criticism, shows his deep awareness of accountability before Allah. He also recognized the strength and courage of women. During his caliphate, women participated in battles not as fighters but as nurses, caretakers, and supporters. Umar ensured they were respected, provided for, and honored for their contributions. He acknowledged that the success of the Muslim Ummah was not only built on the swords of men, but also on the sacrifices, patience, and service of women. Perhaps one of the most telling aspects of Umar's interactions with women was his constant fear of being unjust to them. He often reminded men to treat women well, quoting the teachings of the Prophet, who said, "Fear Allah with regard to women." Umar took this command to heart, knowing that injustice toward women would weigh heavily on him before Allah. His nights were filled with patrols, his days with judgments, and his heart with fear that a single woman might suffer oppression under his rule. This deep sense of accountability is what made him such a remarkable leader, and it is why his stories remain powerful today. When reflecting on Umar's life in relation to women, it is also important to remember the transformation he himself underwent. Before Islam, Umar was known for his toughness and once even opposed the message of the Prophet. But after embracing Islam, his heart softened and his life became one of service, justice, and care. This transformation is itself a message to all men that true strength is not in harshness or domination, but in fairness, compassion, and submission to Allah. In the modern context, Umar's stories resonate strongly. In a world where women still struggle with injustice, exploitation, and inequality, his example shows what Islamic leadership looks like: listening to women, protecting their rights, providing for their needs, and honoring their voices. His humility in being corrected by a woman, his care for widows and single mothers, his policies ensuring fairness, and his personal service to those in need are timeless lessons for every generation. Leadership today often becomes about power and control, but Umar showed that true leadership is about responsibility and service, about carrying the burdens of others and fearing Allah in every decision. The stories of Umar and women are not just historical anecdotes, but living reminders of the principles Islam came to establish. They remind us that women are honored in Islam, that their rights are sacred, and that justice for them is non-negotiable. They remind us that even the strongest of men must humble themselves before truth, even when it comes from the voice of a woman. They remind us that leadership means carrying the weight of accountability for the vulnerable, and that neglecting them is neglecting the trust of Allah. And above all, they remind us that dignity and justice are the core of Islam, embodied not only in the Quran and Sunnah, but in the actions of those who truly lived by them, like Umar ibn al-Khattab.